Amazing truth revealed. How one homeless girl's touching message transformed a billionaire's life. Emma crouched beneath the fading canopy of an oak tree, words spilling from her pen like autumn leaves. She was just 16, yet the streets of Chicago had etched wisdom into her soul, each line another echo of the life lessons she fought to grasp. With every stroke, she scribbled a letter that whispered truths about love, success, and the intangible treasures her broken family had left behind. Each word was a buoy in the sea of despair. For Emma, they were her lifeline, her way of navigating a world that often judged her as less than. She believed there was something grander than material wealth, a treasure trove of knowledge, connection, and warmth that could guide one's way home. Meanwhile, James, a billionaire tech mogul, filled with all the trappings of success, shiny cars, towering offices, a sprawling penthouse, felt an emptiness gnawing at him like a relentless thief in the night. His father's cold expectations had burrowed deep into his mind, a mental prison crafted from the disappointment hidden in every conversation. On paper, he was untouchable. But as he stood in his glass-walled office overlooking the city, he felt like a ghost in his own life, drifting through meaningless days of meetings and deals. He longed to break the mold, but felt too shackled by his own achievements to see any path forward. That morning, a sudden urge led him to the park, an escape from the conference room where numbers blurred into meaningless fog. There, in the midst of the chaos, he caught sight of Emma, entirely lost in her world. It was an image of stark contrast, her tattered clothing against the vibrancy of her scribbled thoughts. As he watched her, he was drawn in, his heart twisting with curiosity and a longing that no wealth could soothe. When a piece of paper fluttered from her lap, he picked it up, his mind racing with a mix of dread and anticipation. Inside, her letter echoed with words he hadn't spoken aloud in years, begging the question of what true success really meant. Love and connection hold more worth than stock prices and spreadsheets. It felt as though she had reached directly into the hollowness of his soul and put into words everything he had buried. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Driven by an insatiable curiosity, James sought Emma out, only to discover her entangled in a desperate situation that jolted him from his privileged existence. His previous encounter with her words left him unsettled, and now he felt the raw, unfiltered edge of her reality crashing against his comfortable facade. She was in a fight for survival, a stark reminder that his own struggles paled in comparison to the chasm she faced every day. Tension coiled within him, the luxury of his life contrasting sharply with the urgency pressing upon her. As he stood on the brink between action and inaction, a realization gripped him. The stakes were rising. He gazed at the girl who, despite her circumstances, radiated hope and wisdom. How could he reconcile his craving for connection with his life of immense wealth? Emma's urgent voice and her truth illuminated the darkness inside him, igniting questions he had never dared to confront. The walls he had built around himself began to wobble under the weight of her reality. Deep down, he knew he was standing on the precipice. Would he have the courage to embrace this opportunity, or would he retreat, forever buried beneath the glittering facade of his existence? The uncertainty washed over him like a billionaire's worst nightmare, a choice that might not just change Emma's trajectory, but redefine his own life entirely. The decision loomed heavily over James, every moment stretched like a taut string about to snap. He thought of the countless board meetings, the unrelenting chase for profit margins, and the hollow victories that filled his life with a numbing repetition. Yet here was Emma, a young girl clinging fiercely to hope amidst turmoil, Her words echoed in his mind. Love and connection. What would embracing those ideals mean for him? A man entrenched in a world where such things felt frivolous. His heart raced as he approached her, the weight of his privilege stark in contrast to her reality. The air was thick with a mixture of electric possibility and fear of the unknown. He felt an instinct surge, an urge to reach out, to learn from her, and in doing so, perhaps find a way to liberate himself from the gilded cage of his life. "Hey," he said, forcing the word out, his voice softer than anticipated. Emma looked up, her dark eyes widening slightly as she processed his presence. She seemed to weigh his intentions before a guarded smile broke through. For a brief moment, the world outside faded away, and he felt an unexpected kinship, the pathos of their separate lives converging in the space between them. "Do you need something?" she replied, more curious than confrontational. James hesitated, grappling with an impulse to lay it all bare. He wanted to tell her how her message had struck him, how it shattered the veneer of his existence. Instead, he found himself asking, "What are you writing?" Emma's demeanor shifted. A flicker of pride illuminated her expression. "Just something I wanted to share with the world," she said, holding up the letter as if it radiated an unseen glow. "It's a reminder that even in the darkest places, there's light." A surge of admiration rippled through him. Here was a girl, with no material possessions, radiating purpose and wisdom beyond her years. "Can I?" he started, the thought of her words etched in his mind. "Can I read it?" Her gaze softened at the request, vulnerability mixed with caution. "It's personal," she admitted, her voice a thread of uncertainty. "I understand. But your words—" He paused, taking a breath that steadied him. "They resonate deeply with me. I want to learn from you." Emma eyed him carefully, as if she could dissect his sincerity like one of her intricate narratives. Finally, she nodded and handed the letter over. As James read each line, he felt raw emotions welling up from corners of his life he had tried to bury. Emma's truths bore no judgment. They revealed a clarity he hadn't allowed himself to contemplate. Her resilience contrasted starkly with his own numbing success. When he finished, James looked up, grappling with a mix of reverence and humility. "Your perspective on success. It's profound," he said, the admission somehow freeing. "It's given me a lot to think about." "You're not the first person to tell me that," she replied, her expression firming. "But it's what you choose to do with that perspective that counts." Her words struck him with the force of revelation. The notion of choice, how naive he had been to think success was a simple destination. It was, in essence, a journey defined by the values chosen along the way. James sat on the grass beside her, the golden glow of the sun sinking in the distance, casting long shadows. They began to discuss the myriad threads tying their lives together. Her stories of survival and his tales of corporate mayhem, building a bridge from fear to understanding. In that moment of connection, something shifted within James. The luxurious displays of wealth that had previously filled him with pride felt increasingly irrelevant. He wondered if true fulfillment lay somewhere beyond his manicured world, in the embrace of shared human experience. "Maybe," he said slowly, deliberating his next words. "I could help you somehow, in exchange for your wisdom." Emma regarded him with a calculating gaze, her instincts honed from a life of necessity. "Help me? How?" As the question hung in the air, an inkling of a plan began to coalesce in James's mind. But what if he reached out again to other voices like Emma's? What initiation was needed to connect those threads to his lavish resources? Before he could voice the burgeoning idea, Emma's expression darkened, suspicion creeping back into her eyes. "The time has come to face who you really are, James." Her challenge pierced through him, a dare that demanded respect, driving him to confront the dizzying enormity of a choice he had yet to make. Would he dare embrace this opportunity and all it entailed? The uncertainty of his answer thrummed in the air, suspended like a taut string, poised to snap. As he pondered his next move, an intense rush of destiny coursed through him. In the balance lay the potential to redefine not only his life, but also the lives of those like Emma. Yet the risk loomed as large as the rewards. How deeply was he willing to dig into the depths of his own disconnected soul? The air was still, yet charged with anticipation as James turned the words over in his mind. He could feel the boundary between who he was and who he could become being stretched, pulled taut by the weight of Emma's challenge. It felt as if he were standing at the edge of a precipice, the chasm of his inner turmoil yawning below him. He didn't just want to help. He desperately needed to embody the change he sought in his life. But how? "Emma," he started, his voice steadying. "I've built my life on the foundations of profit, competition, and control. But you—" He hesitated, collecting the fragmented thoughts swirling within him. "You remind me that there's another way to measure success, through compassion and connection. What if I could lean into that? What would it take?" Emma tilted her head, studying him with the shrewdness of someone who had learned to read people from an early age. "Transformation isn't just about words, James. You'll have to dig deeper than that. What do you want to do? How can you change?" The question echoed like a drumbeat, striking a rhythm inside his chest. Could he transform not just himself, but also his surroundings? For too long, he had insulated himself from the very struggles Emma faced daily, thinking that wealth would somehow absolve him of responsibility. But now, in the presence of her earnestness, he felt cornered by the truth that self-interest alone offered no real solace. I want to create something meaningful." The word sounded foreign, but there was a burgeoning clarity in his mind that dismantled his previous pretenses. "Perhaps I could start by partnering with organizations that focus on people like you, those underserved, those who fight every day to find their footing. I could leverage my resources, my connections." Each syllable felt like a step beyond his previous self, each one echoing with resolve. Emma regarded him carefully, weighing his proposition against her own skepticism. "And what will you gain from such a partnership? Recognition? Profit? When you own so much, you don't need anyone but yourself." He bristled at her words, a flicker of offense igniting before he quelled it with introspection. "I do want recognition, yes, but not for me. Rather for the impact we can make. I have been shackled by success that feels hollow. Perhaps this could finally fill that void." But even as he spoke, a nagging doubt whispered that this was still a calculated move. "And what if it fails?" Emma queried. Her voice was low, almost intimate as she leaned toward him. "You're used to winning, James. What happens when you find that the system you've served has left you ill-equipped for something real?" Her words were a revelation, a cold splash of water that shocked his conscience. He hadn't considered the implications of stepping away from profit-driven motives towards a path filled with uncertainty and vulnerability. Success, as he had known it, was controllable. This was chaotic, human, unpredictable. "I don't want to live in fear anymore," James finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm tired of counting my wealth and feeling poorer every time." In that moment of vulnerability, he saw a glimmer of understanding in Emma's eyes. It was as if she was assessing him anew, beyond just a man in a suit, a man with endless resources ready to be exchanged for favor. "You've taken the first step," she said thoughtfully, her tone shifting to one of encouragement. "But every journey begins with confronting fear and uncertainty, and you must be prepared for failure. It's what you do when that happens that matters most." James felt the truth in her words wash over him, igniting a resolve within. It wasn't just about helping others. It was about redirecting his own life's trajectory away from mere achievement and into purpose. As they sat, the light began to fade, the world around them transforming into silhouettes, shadowing their discourse. A new vision crystallized. He could nurture networks of compassion, creating spaces for voices like Emma's to emerge and be heard. He would no longer be the passive benefactor, but an active participant, vulnerable and engaged. His heart raced as he thought of the steps he would need to take. They wouldn't be easy, and the fear of failure loomed like a specter. In that embracing of vulnerability, however, lay the potential for true fulfillment. But just as a smile began to stretch across his face, doubt flickered at the edges of his mind. Yet, was he ready to share this new vision with those inside his polished world? Would they welcome such radical change, or would they recoil in disdain? How would he navigate the treacherous waters of corporate politics, risking everything he had worked for? The questions swirled within him, heavy as a storm cloud. As he mulled over his next steps, he felt a startling clarity. The next move was not only essential for his path, but for the drop he felt inside. But would he find the courage to leap? James stood at the precipice of his own transformation, yet uncertainty gripped him tighter than any corporate deal he had ever negotiated. He stared out of the window at the bustling streets below, where life moved in ceaseless cycles, each person lost in their own struggles, victories, and stories. He had been just another player in this game, a king among pawns. But now, that power felt like a heavy mantle he was no longer sure he wanted to wear. With Emma's words echoing in his mind, he acknowledged how blinded he had become by success. The time spent nurturing a business empire had come at the expense of genuine connection. He had played his part, but he was tired of the script. The disillusionment had seeped in, gnawing at him like a persistent itch he could never quite reach. Could he dare to articulate this new vision with authenticity, or would he retreat into the comfort of ambition? Suddenly, the gravity of his choices settled in. Yet he had a plan, however vague, and the first step was clear. He needed to engage with those he sought to help directly. No more top-down mandates from an ivory tower. Instead, he felt a burning need to be shoulder to shoulder with the very communities he hoped to uplift. The very next morning, he found himself in the heart of the city's neglected quarters, an area far removed from the high-rises of his existence. The sights and sounds assaulted him. Laughter mingled with despair, hope clashed with despair, and homeless individuals rested against the weathered walls, discarded belongings cradled next to them like old friends. With a hesitant step, he approached a small group of people clustered around a makeshift table laden with food. His lofty suit felt entirely out of place among worn jeans and threadbare jackets. Yet, as he approached, he remembered that his wealth was not just a barrier, but could also become a bridge. "Hi, I'm James," he introduced himself, forcing a confident smile despite the knot twisting in his stomach. "I'd like to help." The skeptical glares that met him were not wholly unexpected. A woman with tired eyes stepped forward, navigating the distance between their worlds with sharp intuition. "And what makes you think we need you? What can you possibly offer that we haven't heard before?" Her words stung, and he felt the heat rising to his cheeks. But instead of shrinking back, an ember of determination ignited within. He was there, ready to be vulnerable, unprotected by the layers of corporate polish. "I don't have all the answers, but I want to learn. I want to understand what you truly need." Their expressions softened slightly, but the reservations remained palpable. The table remained quiet, suspending the moment like a spider's web, delicate but strong. In that pause, he conjured all the lessons he had learned from Emma. Genuine listening was the cornerstone of community building. So, he took a seat at the table, inviting them to share their stories. A sense of anticipation filled the air as they began to talk, reciting tales of hardship intermingled with resilience. Listening became an act of revelation. With every story, James felt pieces of himself shift, a CEO stripped bare of the perceptions others held of him, facing a world that demanded sincerity over status. Yet, every word they spoke dug deeper into his core. He could see the lifetimes of struggle reflected in their eyes, and the gravity of their realities was humbling. Yet with each insight he gained, doubt climbed back into the corner of his mind. Was he really helping, or simply cataloging their suffering as a way to write himself into a hero's narrative? The gnawing question reminded him of Emma's scrutiny. How could he prove that his intentions were genuine when he had spent so many years deriving power from the very systems they were rebelling against? As the conversations waned and he bid farewell, a weight pressed down within him. The seeds of this newfound commitment had been planted, but doubts hung heavy in the air, their roots buried too deep for him to ignore. He was straddling two worlds, and it was not clear where he belonged now. Walking back towards his car, he recognized a new urgency blossoming within him. If he were to embark on this journey, he needed to dig even deeper. There were stakeholders back at the office, decision-makers, the very systems he now sought to challenge. What would he say? How would they react to his desire for change? The stakes felt impossibly high, and as doubt whispered in his ear, he was reminded of that moment with Emma, the moment that had thrust him into this inner war. Suddenly, he stopped short. The question of success burned in the back of his mind, more pressing than ever. In pursuit of fulfillment, he faced the most significant challenge yet. How could he confront the corporate culture that had shaped him for so long and emerge transformed, guiding it towards a more compassionate legacy? With uncertainty coursing through him, he clenched his fists, determination solidifying into resolve. It was time to face the environment he had thrived in, yet now viewed as a battleground. And as he sat behind the wheel, fear and anticipation mingling in a palpable tension, one thought resonated. The true diversion from failure lay in acting before it was too late. Would his pursuit of genuine connection and compassion continue on this rocky path, or would the fear of backlash lead him to retreat back into the shadows of comfort? The roads ahead twisted with possibility, each turn promising either transformation or retreat. And the moment of decision sat heavily upon him. Driving back to the high-rise that had been both a sanctuary and a prison, James replayed the conversations from earlier in his mind. The stories, raw and unfiltered, conjured images that were difficult to shake off. He felt an urgency building within him, a stark contrast to the coldness that surrounded his corporate identity. Arriving at the office, he was greeted by the familiar sight of glass and steel, a fortress of ambition. But today, the surrounding walls felt like they were closing in on him. With every step he took toward the elevator, he questioned the very foundation of his existence here. Was he still the same man who had reveled in deals and numbers, metrics and likelihoods? Or had the empathy sparking within him began to reshape that identity? The drive to make a change collided with the fear of confronting his past. As he entered the boardroom, a slick conference table awaited, its polished surface reflecting the gravitas of the corporate game. The room filled with familiar faces welcomed him in animated conversation about the latest merger, talk anchored in profits and trends. He felt like an outsider among his peers, suddenly disillusioned by their zeal. Instead of listening to the usual back-and-forth banter, his heart raced as he shifted the dynamic. "I want to discuss something different today." The moment those words left his mouth, silence enveloped the room like a thick fog. Eyes turned to scrutinize him. "What do you mean, James?" Tyler, the lead account manager, raised an eyebrow. James could almost feel the pulse of his heartbeat echoing in the silence. "I've come to realize that we need to consider not just our bottom line, but our impact on the community around us. I believe there's a better way to do business, one rooted in integrity and compassion." He immediately sensed the shift in energy, a mix of disbelief and skepticism. "Compassion doesn't pay the bills," another exec remarked, a smirk dancing at the corners of his mouth. The sting of judgment intensified. Painful reminders of his old self pulled at him. Was he losing it? Fighting against systems that had shaped him? Yet, beneath the surface of doubt, a flicker of determination ignited. "I know it sounds idealistic, but what if we could redefine success?" He shot back, the weight of each word pressing against him. Imagine our company leading initiatives that elevate the communities we operate in. We could create jobs and a sense of belonging. We'd be seen not just as investors, but as genuine partners in progress. Some faces softened, but many remained skeptical. The air was tense, charged with disbelief. "Are you suggesting we throw away our profit margins?" Tyler countered, his voice laced with incredulity. "This isn't a charity, it's business." James steeled himself, leaning forward as adrenaline surged. "What if we invest in initiatives that don't just yield financial returns, but also improve quality of life? Communities that thrive can lead to more stable markets. It's a long-term strategy." Conflicted expressions crisscrossed the table. He sensed their curiosity mingling with defiance. Yet the moment felt fragile, and he could see the old James looming in the background, urging him to pack away this vulnerability. "Remember that group I met yesterday? People living on the streets, sharing their stories?" His voice softened, yet held an intensity that demanded presence. "They're not statistics to me. They're people with potential, hope, and fierce resilience. What if we harness their strengths, rather than sidestepping their existence?" He braced himself for the counterattack, but instead, there was silence. For the first time, he saw the group processing information differently. Perhaps it was a seed of curiosity he'd planted, even if they weren't ready to embrace the full vision yet. James left the meeting feeling disoriented, but propelled by an unfamiliar sense of empowerment. A small crack had formed in the armor of conventional thinking, and hope seeped through. It was a delicate opening, requiring nurturing. As he descended into the city streets, he felt buoyed. This was merely the beginning, and the clear challenges ahead loomed larger. But change wouldn't come without confrontation. It wouldn't merely require a discussion, it demanded action. In the days ahead, he would need to connect with Emma. Her perspective could ground him yet again. What new alliances could he forge? What decisions would reshape not only his fate, but potentially the company's trajectory? As thoughts drifted to the future, he realized the most challenging truth. Aligning his newfound beliefs with the relentless pursuit of corporate ambition would demand more strength than he had ever summoned. And just as that thought crystallized, an urgent message pinged on his phone. It was Emma, asking to meet. The urgency in her text illuminated a pathway that led to an unexpected confrontation. Would she stand by his side in this transmutation? Or would her doubts compel him toward a struggle he might not be ready to face? The gravity of transformation weighed heavy, and the potential for conflict brewed. Each decision beckoned a new narrative, one that could redefine success, not just for him, but for countless others. Yet at that moment, he still felt one nagging question hanging in the air. Was he brave enough to write a different ending to his story? James paced the floor of his apartment, the soft hum of city life outside failing to penetrate his thoughts. Emma's message replayed in his mind, each word a cue card for the impending dialogue he knew they needed to have. There was a frantic energy peppered with anticipation brewing within him. He had taken the first step in the boardroom. Now, he had to articulate the changes within himself to someone who had seen him at his worst. The memories of their past swirled fiercely as he sat down, his leg bouncing nervously. Emma had always been the voice of reason, someone unafraid to challenge his dogged pursuit of success defined by profits and status. They had shared a connection built on mutual respect and a subtle undercurrent of something deeper. But he'd never let that murmur rise to the surface. Until now, when the doorbell rang, an involuntary shiver shot down his spine. He paused, taking a deep breath before opening the door. Emma stood there, a sense of calm surrounding her, despite the tension he could feel radiating off his body. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room briefly, landing on him with a curious intensity. "Hey," she greeted softly, sensing something had shifted in him since their last encounter. "Hey," he replied, motioning toward the couch. They both settled, the weight of unspoken words thick in the air. Finally, Emma broke the silence. You sounded almost passionate in that meeting. I could hardly believe it was you. Her observation punctured his carefully assembled facade. I'm trying to be, he admitted, his throat suddenly dry. I think I've been blind to what has really mattered these past few years. Emma leaned forward, her expression blending concern with curiosity. What do you mean? James hesitated, fighting against an inexplicable urge to retreat and shield himself from her probing gaze. Instead, he pressed on. I met a group of people living on the streets. They aren't just statistics or part of some community outreach plan. They have stories. They have lives. And I can't ignore that anymore. If I want to make a difference, I have to start seeing people, not just numbers. Her expression shifted, and he caught a glimmer of understanding. You're actually serious about this? About redefining success? I am, he replied, emboldened by her attention. But I need your help. You've always been the one who pushed me to think differently. I don't want to get lost again. Emma studied him, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. That's a heavy burden, James. Are you ready to take on the financial backlash of corporate change, knowing that not everyone will agree with your vision? I've thought about that, he acknowledged, his heart racing as he grappled with the enormity of the shift he was contemplating. But what good is success if it comes at the cost of people's lives? I can't go back to that. I'd rather risk everything, my career, my reputation, than ignore the potential for real change. For a moment, silence enveloped them, allowing his conviction to hang heavily in the space between them. Emma's eyes glimmered, revealing how aligned she was with his new purpose, yet grappling with doubt. Then what's the plan? Because sheer passion won't cut it in your world. James felt a surge of clarity. We can start small. Identify initiatives that showcase the strengths of these individuals, align them with mentorship programs or job placements. We tackle it piece by piece. This isn't just about charity. It's about creating sustainable impact. Her expression shifted again, a glimmer of excitement breaking through. That could work. People love success stories, and if you present it in a way that aligns with corporate responsibility, there might be a path. Then we make that path distinct, he said, feeling inspired by her support. Genuine partners, not just transactions. Emma shifted closer, a newfound intensity fueling the atmosphere. Yet, within him, uncertainty loomed. Every part of him reverberated with the fear of rejection from his peers and the crumbling of the corporate empire he had fought so hard to succeed in. Are you ready for the backlash? She pressed, her voice steady yet questioning. James stared into her eyes, his determination battling against the rising anxiety. The moment felt pivotal, a clarion call to action, daring him to leap further than he ever had before. The time has come to face that fear, he said firmly. Then another message pinged on his phone. This time, it was from Tyler, a meeting scheduled for the following day. The sheer weight of the corporate world clawed back at him, and James swallowed hard. Looks like the fight is just beginning, he muttered, feeling the duality of commitment and trepidation intertwine. As Emma's expression stirred with a blend of anticipation and apprehension, James understood that real transformation demanded not only courage, but a willingness to face the pushback he knew was inevitable. What if his next move didn't just end at a conversation, but ignited a confrontation with everything he'd ever valued? And as the weight of this realization settled within, he sensed the air crackling around them, an invitation for action that held the potential to redefine the essence of success itself. Would he stand firm amidst the storm he was about to unleash? James stared at the bright screen of his phone, the words from Tyler feeling like a noose tightening around his resolve. A meeting, mere hours away, where the board would evaluate not only his recent performance, but also his vision for the company's future. Each ping from the device felt like an urgent call to retreat, a familiar tug of fear beckoning him to reconsider his path. What if the board dismissed his ideas as naive? What if they deemed him a liability? He glanced at Emma, who was watching him intently. The moment felt weighty, each breath drawn a painful reminder of the stakes. "It's time to execute the plan," he finally said, beyond any logical sense of the word. "Wait," Emma interjected, her voice steady yet filled with caution. "Are you certain about this? Maybe let's gather more data or consult a few experts first. I've made my decision." The moment he spoke, a flicker of doubt threatened to derail his certainty. Instinctively, he ran a hand through his hair, his palms sweaty as the shadows of self-doubt crept back in. Emma's hesitation ignited a primal urge to defend his choice, but deep down, he knew it was self-preservation, not the hunger for truth. "James," she said firmly, bringing his gaze to meet hers, "you don't have to shoulder this on your own. It's okay to feel scared. It means you're stepping out of your comfort zone. But that can't come at the expense of your mental health." Her expression bore the weight of concern that made him reconsider the gravity of his intentions. It struck him that he wasn't simply challenging his career path. He was dismantling the very perceptions of success he had nurtured for years, shattering them in pursuit of something more genuine. Yet, in that reckoning, he found himself operating under a heavy veil of isolation. "What do I do if they don't understand?" he asked, vulnerability seeping into his voice. Emma's eyes softened. "You stand firm in your beliefs, but also prepare your arguments. Show them that this can result in profits and positive community relations. Connect the dots for them. They'll eventually see your vision." The prospect excited him, yet the fear gnawed at the edges of his resolve. How would he articulate such an emotional pivot in a space designed for statistics and projections? The thought of navigating the minefield of corporate skepticism churned in his stomach. "I want to integrate mentorship programs and job placements. I want real impact," he spoke, conviction returning to his tone. "But I need to present it in a way they'll appreciate, preferably by framing it through mutual benefit." "Exactly. Show them their bottom line can be bolstered by the stories you'll showcase. Get them excited about your vision," she encouraged. Yet as he internalized her words, a wave of introspection washed over him. What was he hoping to accomplish? Did he want validation? A stamp of approval from the very authority figures he had begun to question? Or was he seeking genuine impact for others, irrespective of the accolades? This gnawing introspection opened a chasm of conflict within him. Emma must have sensed his internal struggle. "You have everything to gain if you stick to your authentic voice. Just remember that while others might have their short-sightedness, you can illuminate a path that leads both to empathy and profit." He nodded slowly, but uncertainty still shrouded his clarity. As the minutes ticked closer to the meeting, he envisioned standing before his colleagues, allured by the chase of accolades, and challenging them to rethink their priorities. Would they see the merit in his ideas? Or would they brand him an idealist prisoner of his conscience? "In your heart, you know the truth," Emma reassured softly. "You have to align your passion with purpose. That's where you'll find the strength, and they can't ignore that." James sat straighter, the flicker of hope igniting within him. Maybe she was right. Perhaps passion, if channeled correctly, could serve as armor against the impending scrutiny. Tomorrow would indeed be a reckoning. As minutes transformed into hours, he felt the walls of his comfort zone close in. The looming threats of rejection competed against the shimmering possibility of transformation, each weighing heavily on his mind. With a bitter taste of tension, he clenched his fists. Was he prepared to embrace the storm? Would he risk everything he had built to implement a new legacy of value? As the night deepened outside, he recognized the profound shift unraveling within him. It would be a leap into the unknown. And yet, he felt compelled, the weight of his convictions propelling him forward. Would he find the fortitude to reveal his burgeoning vulnerability to those unwilling to change? Would the corporate stronghold embrace or ridicule his emerging ideals? With dawn approaching, he resolved that even if the ground shifted under him, he would have no choice but to leap onward into uncharted territory. The fluorescent lights flickered above, filling the conference room with a sterile glow that mirrored James's racing heart. As he entered, the air bristled with the low hum of anticipatory chatter. Colleagues clustered near the window, their laughter echoing like currents crashing against a rocky shore. Yet within him, an undertow of fear threatened to pull him under. He took a deep breath, recalling Emma's reassurances. What if this was more than just a presentation? What if it was the moment he began to redefine himself, not just as a leader, but as a catalyst for change? He had wrestled with this decision night after night, teetering between ambition and integrity, temptation and authenticity. With each step toward the long table, he felt the weight of their gazes shift. Eyes narrowed, not with the usual skepticism, but with a flicker of curiosity. He could harness that intrigue. He could steer them toward the vision he harbored. A vision of empathy woven into profitability. They might not realize it yet, but they needed his perspective as much as he needed their support. As he positioned himself at the head of the table, he glanced at the assembled board members. Their faces, a blend of authority and indifference, challenged him to prove the worth of his ideas. Did he possess the strength to break beyond their preconceived notions? A firm resolve set within him. It was time to confront his own doubts and emerge as more than just a participant in their corporate narrative. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. "Today I want to talk about how we can leverage our position not just for profit, but also for purpose." He initiated the presentation, visuals illuminating his points, data shifts, social impact reports, compelling images of people whose lives represented more than just statistics. He anticipated the skepticism, ready to deflect any dismissive comments. But instead, he noticed nods of interest. Perhaps they were actually listening. As he spoke, he felt a shift within himself, an emerging conviction. In that moment of vulnerability, he embraced authenticity as his armor, stripping away the layers of corporate jargon and presenting the heart of his vision. "I believe we can build mentorship programs and job placements that will benefit both our community and our bottom line. We have the power to change lives, and that can enhance our corporate image in ways financial reports can't quantify." The enthusiasm in his voice cracked the tension, creating palpable energy in the room. As he continued, James delved deeper, weaving personal anecdotes and case studies about impact, each story painting a vivid picture of connection and potential transformation. The board's expressions transformed, skepticism giving way to a burgeoning spark of interest. Suddenly, Tyler shifted in his seat, the calm demeanor he usually wore slipping for a moment. "James," he interjected, a challenge laced within his tone. "Do you really think we should prioritize community engagement over maximizing shareholder value? Isn't that a risky gamble for a company like ours?" James met his gaze squarely, feeling clarity coursing through his veins. "It's not about choosing one over the other, Tyler. It's about discovering how they can coexist harmoniously, where we can uplift lives while enhancing our profitability. Our success doesn't diminish when we choose to empower others. It multiplies." The room fell into a hushed consideration, a juxtaposition of thoughtful silence punctuated by rapid mental calculations as board members scanned the financial implications of his proposal. Taking a breath, he segued into the catalyst for real impact, the stories he had gathered, the human faces behind each statistic. This is beyond data. These are individual lives. In the end, it's about creating a legacy, not just an income stream. As the meeting progressed, he noticed a shift. One by one, they began to respond, to engage. Not to the usual banter, but with questions about logistics, potential partnerships, and timelines. When the discussion wrapped, James felt a rush of adrenaline. He had not only articulated a vision, he had ignited a spark of collaboration. Yet, deep within, the question lingered. If they accepted his vision, would this newly forged alliance hold against the inevitable resistance of old habits, both within the board and within himself? As he gathered his materials, ready to leave the room, Tyler's stare lingered on him, calculating and unsettled. Would James emerge unscathed if the board began to fracture under pressure from traditionalists who clung to the past? Would he be able to maintain his newfound resolve amidst the storm? The answer teetered just out of reach, a cliffhanger he could hardly fathom. James stepped out of the conference room into the dim hallway, the adrenaline pumping through his veins, slowly giving way to a sense of uncertainty. The tension of the meeting lingered like an unshakable fog. He could still feel the weight of Tyler's scrutiny, the unvoiced doubts that hung heavily in the air. Was his bold vision for integrating purpose with profit truly sustainable? Or had he merely opened a Pandora's box that could lead to backlash? Clutching his laptop tightly, he made his way to his office, each step echoing with the potential consequences of his words. Doubt had crept in, wrapping itself around his earlier confidence. He had stirred the pot, but at what cost? Was he ready to face the repercussions? Settling into his chair, he shut the office door, desperate for solitude to process the whirlwind of thoughts. His reflection in the glass pane revealed a man caught in internal conflict, a man who had dared to tread the untrodden path. He considered the choices he had made, weighing ambition against the pressures of conformity. As the minutes ticked by, he reflected on the board's response. The flicker of interest he had witnessed felt fragile, a flame easily extinguished by traditionalists who favored the status quo. James knew he would need to solidify his position and build alliances to fortify his ideas. Suddenly, he recalled Emma's assertion during one of their recent discussions. "You need allies who believe in your vision just as much as you do." Inspired by her words, he opened his laptop and began to reach out to colleagues who had shown even the slightest interest. He crafted personalized messages, inviting them to a brainstorming session where he could further elaborate on his proposals and gather their feedback. What if he could create a coalition of forward thinkers, people willing to challenge outdated paradigms? This wasn't just about winning over the board. It was about building a movement within the company. As he hit send on the emails, a spark of determination ignited within him. He considered that every great change began with a small group of dedicated individuals. What if he could harness their energy to create momentum? His heart raced at the thought. The prospect of positioning himself not just as a challenger of tradition, but as a transformative leader. James leaned back in his chair, a flame of resolve lighting in his chest. He needed to prepare for the challenge that lay ahead, to anticipate the pushback from the old guard. He began mapping out a plan, identifying specific data points and case studies to reinforce his arguments. Each detail would need to align with the company's core values and demonstrate the potential for tangible benefits. A knock jolted him from his thoughts. It was Sarah, one of the younger analysts, known for her innovative approach to problem-solving. "Hey, James. I saw your presentation, and I wanted to talk to you about the mentorship program idea. I have some insights that might help frame it better for the board." A smile broke on his face, warming his spirit. "I'd love to hear your thoughts," he replied, excitement bubbling within him as she entered his office. As they delved into discussions, James felt fortified. It was a turning point, a shift from solitude to collaboration. He needed voices like Sarah's, individuals who could lend their strengths to the vision he was sculpting. But even as they brainstormed, a gnawing realization began to form in the back of his mind. Would this internal coalition be strong enough to withstand the inevitable counterattacks? Would they be as willing as he was to forsake comfort to chase something greater? The clock ticked, reminding him that change couldn't wait. And with the ticking came the knowledge that he was forging a path through uncharted territories where loyalty and tradition clashed with ambition and reform. As their discussion continued, James felt the pull toward the next step. It wasn't merely about convincing the board. It was about igniting a shift within the entire corporate culture. The stakes were higher than he had anticipated. And in that moment, as ideas flowed between them, he realized the time had come to face the impending confrontation with the traditionalists head-on. With their support, he was prepared to challenge the norms that seemed invincible. But little did he know, a new opponent was looming in the shadows. One who had a vested interest in keeping the company on the same predictable path. Would James be ready for the fight that awaited him just around the corner? A storm was brewing, one he would have to navigate carefully to emerge victorious. The day of reckoning arrived, a day decorated with the stark dichotomy of hope and anxiety. James stood at the threshold of his office, the clamor of the bustling streets below filling his ears with the reminder of the lives he sought to impact. It was time to present his vision, not just to the board, but to the very essence of who he aspired to become. As he entered the boardroom, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Colleagues, previously charged with skepticism, now turned curious. He had ignited intrigue. He just needed to fan the flames of that interest into a roaring fire of transformation. He approached the podium with newfound clarity, grounded in the countless stories he had collected, the faces behind the statistics that had once only been numbers to him. "Today, I stand before you," he began, his voice resonating with conviction. "Not just as your chief executive, but as a partner in a vision that transcends our current definitions of success. We can integrate purpose as power, showing that compassion is an engine for profitability." As he presented his ideas, the room fell into an attentive silence. He showcased data from various mentorship programs, accompanied by testimonials from those whose lives had changed because of corporate responsibility. This was no longer just a proposal. It was an invitation to be part of something greater. But even as he spoke, doubt cast a shadow. Would they truly see the potential, or would Tyler's voice of resistance drown him out once more? James felt his heart race at the thought of dissent cutting through his vision like a knife. But he pressed on. With each success story he shared, the energy shifted in the room. He watched as some executives leaned forward, captivated by the impact these initiatives had produced. It became clear, this wasn't merely about charity. It was about empowering a workforce that, in turn, could enhance their bottom line. But then came the challenges, as he had expected. Tyler spoke up, his brow furrowed. "James, this sounds commendable, but I'm concerned about risking shareholder value. What evidence do we have that this will yield what we need to grow?" James inhaled, steadied by the realization that challenges were integral to progress. "What if I told you that companies investing in community welfare have reported increased loyalty, reduced turnover, and even enhanced brand reputation?" He framed his response not as a rebuttal, but as an opportunity to integrate their desires for growth with his vision. He extended the conversation into logistics and measurable outcomes, transforming what had started as philosophical idealism into tangible strategy. The shift was palpable. The board was no longer a wall, but a discussion, a collaboration carving out potential paths forward. Soon hands shot up, inquiries fired at him with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. As they dissected his plan, his program metrics, outreach strategies, potential pitfalls, each question bred clarity, developing the blueprint further. This was no mere ideal, it was code for actionable change rooted in community and connection. As the meeting progressed, he gained allies even among skeptics, each voice slowly beginning to resonate with his vision. There was a palpable energy in the room, a shift from old habits to a burgeoning willingness to step into the unknown. When the meeting finally concluded, James felt a surge of liberation sweep over him. He had moved beyond the limitations of his former self, articulating not just ideas, but a roadmap constructed from the very voices he had fought to uplift. There had been resistance, yes, but it had fostered growth, both personally and corporately. In the ensuing weeks, the plan came to life. Mentorship programs were established, partnerships with community organizations solidified, and success stories began to emerge, not just in the boardroom, but at grassroots levels. With Emma's guidance and his newfound allies, he became more than a leader. He became a facilitator of change, fostering connections that had previously evaded him. Weeks evolved into months, and as he looked out his office window one crisp morning, he noticed a group gathered below, a diverse tapestry of youth engaged in a workshop. And among them, he spotted Emma, facilitating conversation and laughter that once seemed unimaginable. He felt a swelling sense of pride, mixed with an overarching acknowledgement of transformation. Once a man shackled by his own wealth, he now bore witness to the very theories he had posited come to fruition. Genuine connections blossomed into partnerships, and those stories of resilience he had once collected now formed the cornerstone of a corporate ethos rooted in empathy. In that moment, he realized this was not just success, it was fulfillment. A profound earned satisfaction, distinct from any accolade or financial gain. He had embarked on a journey that reshaped not only his identity, but redefined the company's purpose, a shift from profit-driven motives towards shared humanity. This was achievement, not merely born from ambition, but cultivated through empathy and connection. As he stepped into this new realm of possibility, he felt solid confidence beneath his resolve, fully immersed in the collective journey he had begun. Ultimately, the transformation unlocked doors he never knew existed, and in doing so, James conquered not only the corporate landscape, but, most importantly, the cavernous void within. This was his moment. The moment to inspire others to pursue their own transformative journeys. The future glimmered with the prospect of change, not just for himself, but for countless others whose stories intersected with his. Now was the time to propel this momentum forward for the sake of others. Would he take the leap? After all, genuine connection was now the heart of his mission. It was indeed time to rise together. Join this transformative journey. You need to subscribe now to witness how stories redefine lives. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about this new journey, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. The revolution of empathy has just begun.